Hi, everyone. I'm Mariah Propus, class of 1991, and I'm really proud to welcome all of you to the latest installation of Connect with Canisius. And today we have a very exciting community conversation planned with President Steve Stoute, the 25th president of Canisius College. And so I'm going to quickly go over our Zoom rules. And again, thank everyone for joining us. So we got a number of questions submitted to us in advance. Thank you so much to everyone for your interest, for your attention. We will cover almost all of the pre-submitted questions that we received during our conversation over the next hour. But we do want to try and save some time at the end for live questions. So I would ask, please utilize the chat function at the bottom of your screen if you want to pose a question to us, or if you would like to communicate with the Canisius staff during our discussion today. I'm so thrilled that we have such great support and participation in our live event webinar today. We have representation on from 19 states across the United States. We have Canadian representation on. Our attendees today include our wonderful alumni base, parents of our current students here at Canisius, faculty and staff, both current and former. So thank you all again for your engagement and your support. We have alumni represented today from classes ranging from 1961 to 2022. So I would call one of our early goals in terms of diversity in our audience today a real victory for us. So thank you all again. Now, it's an honor and a privilege for me to introduce all of you to President Steve Stoute. As you likely know, President Stoute began his new role with us on July 1st. He comes to us from DePaul University, which is the largest Catholic university in the United States. And we've already been able to see President Stoute's leadership experience and how relevant that has proved in terms of his task before President Stoute and all of us in terms of leading Canisius. President Stoute's prior professional experience includes working as an attorney, higher education leadership experience at Princeton University, both in athletics and as a capital giving officer. So in my involvement as a trustee of the college and leading our institutional advancement efforts, I love President Stoute's experience in their Office of Development. He was born and raised in Trinidad and Tobago and emigrated to the United States in 2000 to attend Seton Hall University in New Jersey. So to put a little bit of a personal spin on this, I've been so fortunate to spend some quality time with President Stoute since joining us both as a trustee, involved with institutional advancement, serving to support the transition plan for President Stoute over the next year, but certainly proud to say I've been able to see President Stoute in action in a lot of situations, and it's been such a pleasure and a privilege. And so just to give all of you a little bit of context, what this means for our college, having this brand of leadership at the helm. First of all, the unique visioning that becomes possible with a dynamic change agent like President Stoute. He is someone who understands that we are balancing 152 years of history at our college and generations of stakeholders who rely on Canisius remaining a top Jesuit, Catholic college and university in our Western New York community and beyond. I'm so proud of the positive impact that we collectively have all made in the world of higher education regarding diversity, equity, inclusion, togetherness, and belonging, but especially accessibility. And Canisius is helping and at the forefront of driving real change in the higher education arena to keep our country educated, competitive, and certainly serving to develop the future leaders, not only of our Western New York community, but preparing them for their life journey. And then finally, it has been an absolute delight to see the reaction of our student community, both current and alumni students. And I hope for all of you joining us today that you'll be fortunate enough to see President Stoute interact live with our students. His approachability, likability factor is so high, and I know that's going to translate really well, even in our virtual event environment here today. The delight that our students have displayed when they get an opportunity to speak with President Stoute is just amazing. And as we know, our students are our finest product, and their reaction to our new president has been simply awesome. And that is a huge win for all of us today. So President Stoute, thank you for your immediate and early impact. I'm so excited about our conversation. And let me turn it over to you for some introductory remarks, please.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Mariah, for the introduction and for hosting and moderating our conversation today. Thank you all for joining us from wherever you are across the country and obviously in Canada, as Mariah mentioned. I will endeavor to keep my introductory remarks brief so that we can leave time for as many questions as possible. Like Mariah said, we have so many questions that were pre-submitted. Hopefully some will come in live as well. But really quickly for me, I've been asked any number of times recently about why Canisius, why come to Buffalo, why pursue this opportunity. So in brief, I want to share with you what that thought process was like for me, and why Canisius and why Buffalo. And so in pursuing this opportunity, I read so much about the rebirth, the resurgence, the renaissance here in Buffalo. And I thought to myself, what better place to participate in that process, in that growth, in that redevelopment, in that rebirth for the city through the lens of a Catholic Jesuit urban institution, right? I've said so many times that my story is the higher education story. That's right. As a person of color, as an immigrant, as the first person in my family to go to college, as a first generation college student, higher education has transformed my life and my family's life for generations to come. And I believe in the power of higher education to do that for more and more students and families and communities for generations to come. So in thinking about the opportunity, I thought first and foremost that Canisius was perfectly positioned to lead in a meaningful way that resurgence and that renaissance in Buffalo, and do it differently. Do it differently than it's been done in the past. Do it differently than it's been done in other cities around the country, because not in every instance, everyone doesn't benefit from that type of resurgence. And so for me, the opportunity to come to Canisius was one that was perfect for those reasons. And I couldn't be more honored and humbled and privileged to lead this incredible institution. I look forward to all of our work together, our shared work, as Jesuits say, as collaborators in mission, to continue to deliver on our promise of Canisius for future generations of students. Thank you for all that you do for Canisius, wherever you may be. And I look forward to our conversation today.
Great. Thank you so much, President Stoute. You know, I agree with you wholeheartedly. As a proud Buffalonian that lived out of town for almost 20 years, I also felt the renaissance that Buffalo is experiencing, not just from an economic perspective, and it became very attractive for me in terms of my return to Buffalo just a couple of years ago. But I do think it's important, you know, for our community that the way for us to move forward and rise together is that we're able to attract really notable leadership individuals with diversity in thought and experience to help propel our whole experience together. So we're going to move through a series of questions. Again, the majority of these were pre-submitted, so thank you again. Encourage those of you to use the chat function if you want to submit a live question to us. And we're going to talk really through kind of three categories, but certainly, you know, the floor is yours for our audience here today. And first, we're going to talk a little bit about academics and enrollment and some of the framework that makes Canisius work and your thoughts in that regard. I thought a great way for us to maybe lead off would be with your theme, your mantra, as I was calling it, which is Together We Rise. And there's so much to that. I loved being at your inauguration. We had students that had Rise t-shirts on. So obviously, you know, it's a mantra, a tagline, a theme that has taken hold of our community. But could you talk a little bit about your thought process? Why create a theme right when you first got here? And what is it that you want it to mean to all of us?
Oh, absolutely. And interestingly enough, we did a competition and a student designed the T-shirt that we produced around the inauguration. It was a lot of fun to meet her and talk to her about how she interpreted the theme. And so for me, it was, the experience of reflecting on the opportunity to lead Canisius. And so I was obviously appointed to the role in February, but didn't start until July. And so there were 4 months in there where I was thinking about the work of the college and how we move the institution forward as quickly as possible, but as engaged as possible. Right. So how do we connect all of the varying constituents who care so deeply about the institution to the work that lies ahead of us? And in getting my hands on some work by Jesuit authors, one of the things that appealed to me was the idea of Jesuits throughout history responding to a call, responding to what is happening in the society around them as their mission to go address whatever that issue is, whatever the call is. And so I began to formulate the theme in looking at some of the most pressing societal issues that face us as human race, and climate breakdown, social, racial, economic injustice, political polarization, and thinking about those as the call from our society to us as an institution. As Canisius College, the question then becomes, how do we respond to that? And then the more I reflected on it, the more I spent time thinking and praying on it, the theme of RISE became very clear. And it's first and foremost, we must, as an institution, renew our commitment to justice. And that is justice in the broadest terms. It's social, it's economic, it's racial, it's environmental. So renew our commitment to justice, inspire a new generation of leaders who will not accept the status quo, right? So that is critically important because the saying goes, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. Mm-hmm. And so for too long, we've been beholden to the system and the way it is, and we've changed it on the margins. But my belief is we need drastic change in order to achieve different, more equitable outcomes for all of our brothers and sisters. Serve everyone we encounter from a place of love. As a Catholic Jesuit institution, the gospel is the gospel of love. And so how do we treat everyone we encounter with love and empower others by our actions to do the same, right? Again, a hallmark of what it means to be Jesuit is to do, is to act. And so when we go out and act in this way, we, by our example, will say to others, it is okay to follow us, which fits perfectly because this is where leaders are made. So that's where the theme came from. And I was just really excited that in talking about it with the trustees and with the leadership on campus, that people began to see it as a way for us to operate, a way for us to live and lead. Because otherwise I would have to come up with something else.
Well, it feels like an incredibly critical values ecosystem for all of us. And that's how it feels. And I think one of the best parts about it is so relatable to all constituents, all parts of the institution. So my commendations for penning something that has really become a theme for all of us to be a part of. In addition to this values ecosystem, let's talk a little bit about academic programs at Canisius. Love to hear both your short and long-term vision for what academic excellence looks like, and then any change management that you want to propose in terms of our academic framework.
No, that's a great question. And I think, in terms of programs, oftentimes we think of new, right? Something we have to do that's entirely new to the institution. And in the conversations I've had, because I've been on this listening tour around campus with our faculty and our staff, particularly our faculty, One of the things that has become very clear to me already is the idea of interdisciplinary and multidisciplinary study. And so the new there is connecting diverse interests and subject matters to bring new perspective to an existing challenge, right? The solutions to some of the most pressing issues that we face may not lie in uncharted territory, but they may lie in the space where we interact across difference, across academic expertise. And so that's something I think in the short term, we need to explore from an academic perspective. How do we become the place where interdisciplinary and multidisciplinary study is a hallmark of a Canisius educational experience? So far less we need to dive, and our students need to dive deep in one area, but they get this very well-rounded, very robust educational experience grounded in multiple subject matters. And that will allow them to process through challenges and issues from various perspectives. And that to me is exciting, and that is new. So that's one piece. And in terms of the long term, and I've said this any number of times, we have to rethink who are our Canisius students of the future. The data is clear, demographics are changing. The numbers of high school students who are college going is declining precipitously, particularly for us here in the Northeast, in Western New York. Those declines starting in 2026 and beyond pose a serious challenge to us, but they apply only to traditional aged, first-time, full-time freshmen, right? So 17 years old, 18 years old, graduating from high school, there will be 15% fewer of them by 2026. How do we think about our Canisius students of the future in the context of adults, adult learners, professionals? How do we think about creating a Canisius College experience for them as they pursue their own educational goals, which are not tied to an undergraduate degree? They're not tied to a degree at all. Maybe it is a credential or a certificate or a specific skill set that they need over the course of a few weeks to advance in their career. And so that's the longer term challenge and opportunity from an academic perspective, is to rethink who our students are and how we meet them where they are.
So I love that concept of being more multidisciplinary in terms of what we are offering from an academic perspective. And, you know, in my day job, in my industry, I would, offer to everyone joining us today that we are looking for new college graduates to recruit and hire that are multidisciplinary in their experience. No longer are we looking for one degree track. We want a finance major who also had a smattering of cybersecurity and data and statistics. We want a risk and insurance major that also has some real business experience and perhaps communications experience as well. So that is so translatable in terms of opportunity for our graduates as they, seek to pursue their careers going forward. So that is great to hear. Let's talk a little bit, let's go even higher level than that. And let's talk about the overall strategic planning process for the college. And strategic planning can be very aspirational, very long-term, either very all-inclusive or, very focused on a particular dimension. What does that look like? Do we have a 5-year plan for the college? How will we manage to that plan? How will we augment the plan? How do you see that process moving forward?
That's the work that we are doing right now around the college. And so when I think about this, and this is what I did in my most recent stop before coming to Canisius as Chief of Staff to the President and Vice President of Strategy, was focus on implementing a strategic plan. We have not had one. We're working in a gap between the end of the last plan and now building this new plan, which is appropriate because oftentimes an institution wants to wait for a new president and new leadership to engage in this process. And the way I think about it, the way we've gone about doing this work thus far is first setting the vision. What is the vision for Canisius in the future? And people that do visioning work often talk about something that is just outside of your grasp. And so we have a history here of 6-year strategic plans. So with that in mind, I thought the vision, where we are going, should be 2 plans, so 12 years. So I talk about, I ask questions to our community on listening tours about Canisius 2035. What do we look like in 2035 as an institution? And it will take us 2 strategic plans to get there. The strategic plan itself is the how. How will we get to that endpoint, that North Star, which is Canisius 2035? And that's been incredibly exciting to have those conversations, to pose these very large overarching questions about what is so important to us as an institution, what is so core to a Canisius College experience that it must be what we do in 2035.
Mm-hmm.
What is nice to have, but perhaps not necessary, because our students are changing, technology advancements, our challenges are evolving, ever evolving. What are those things that we do well now, maybe we've done well historically, that in 2035, we likely won't need to do to be Canisius? And what will people say about Canisius in 2035? What is a Canisius experience? And what will people say about us in 2035? I have loved posing those questions and just listening to our faculty, to our staff, to our leadership, talk about their dreams and aspirations and vision for the institution. So we will collect some of that feedback and charge the strategic planning committee with building the plan, identifying pillars and themes and goals and objectives. And that's the work of next semester. The goal is to have a plan for the Board of Trustees to approve in May. And following that, we'll be able to announce it to the campus community and build some excitement around where we're going in the 6 years, in the first 6-year block of getting to Canisius 2035. But it's work that we will have to engage with our alumni constituents as well. And so I'm looking forward to those conversations.
Great. So I want to pivot off. We got a really great live question here from Leon Kalsa. So thank you for your question. But I want to pose it in line with what we were talking about in terms of strategic planning. So lots of stakeholders involved in the strategic planning process. All voices are important. We want, obviously, diversity in voices and opinion that has to translate into an executable strategic plan. One voice that we know is critically important is that of our faculty. So can you give us an early view into, what have the priorities been that our teaching faculty have expressed to you around Canisius, certainly in the context of a strategic plan, but maybe even more practically, President Stoute?
Oh, that's a good question, and thanks, Leon, for posing it. The things that I hear from our faculty are first and foremost resources, right? So support for the faculty to do the critically important work that they do, from the perspective of, as our students have evolved and changed, and they need something different from us as an institution, we must support our faculty in doing that work, in meeting that need. And that sometimes that looks like innovation in the curriculum, right? How do we think about delivering the content of a class, of a program? How do we think about delivering that differently? But understanding that we must support the faculty to do that. We cannot simply say, go ahead and do something drastically different and innovate when we don't provide the resources for faculty development. So that is one thing that I've heard and will be important to us, is how do we think about faculty development? The other resource piece of it is space. And so in higher education, we often talk about silos and the need to break down silos. but often our physical spaces and structures perpetuate the silos. And this goes back to the point about multidisciplinary and interdisciplinary approach. We have to create and build the spaces and the structures that allow for our faculty across disciplines to engage with each other, to interact with each other and our students. It is in doing that that we will bring new energy to the academic enterprise, but we will also find creativity and innovation in those spaces. So from the resource perspective is multi-tiered. It is faculty development, support for faculty development, but also our physical space and our technology resources as well. And because we do want to be more flexible, adapt different modalities to deliver a Canisius education. And there we need to invest in our technological resources as well.
Great, thank you. So there are many professional sectors today that are incredibly competitive. Higher education certainly falls into the incredibly competitive space, not just in the United States, but on a global basis. So talk to us about students and enrollment. And I always appreciate you have a very data-driven statistical approach to enrollment, but let's really talk about focus on enrollment. How are we going to drive enrollment optimally? What do our goals look like in that space?
Absolutely. So many institutions are tuition dependent, right? So the ones that are not are the very elite with significant endowments that they rely on to drive revenue. So we are tuition dependent. We have to think about how do we continue to enroll students who come to us and are seeking a Canisius education. And so a couple of things that we know to be true based on the data. And this goes back to the demographics and the declining number of high school students who are college going. So in thinking about that, one, how do we continue to address those high school students who can and will benefit from a Canisius experience and education? How do we continue to articulate in a compelling way why those students and their families should continue to choose Canisius over any number of choices? So I think last year, the College Board, the group that administers the SAT, they do any number of surveys. And so the average high school senior applied to 21 institutions. And for us, our students, our incoming class of 478 in the fall, that number was 11 or 12, I think. And what we know, again, parsing through the data, is if we are in the top 3 institutions on that list of 11, we have a really good chance of enrolling and yielding that student and getting them to matriculate at Canisius. If you're outside of that, it is a fairly difficult task in getting that student and their family to commit to Canisius. So first, we have to think about how do we get in the top, at the very top of the list, in the top 3, and then articulate why we're different. What distinguishes us from our competitors and from their other choices? And there are some things that we can rely on in articulating that. And I talk about our faculty as teacher mentors. Right? Because what I've heard in my conversations with our faculty, our students, alumni, going back to the 60s, the ones I've met, almost universally, everyone has a story about a faculty member and the impact that faculty member had on their success at Canisius and their professional success, because that relationship continues well past graduation. So how do we think and talk about teacher mentors and how valuable that is for our students while they're students and after they graduate? The second piece, critically important for today's constituent group, the power of our alumni network. 50,000 strong, 20,000 plus here in Western New York. How do we articulate for students, prospective students and families that what you get at Canisius is an incredible education, but you become part of this network of people who are leading their organizations, leading their communities, leading their families in ways that are profound. Third, it's our values and creating, forming, transforming leaders with a conscience. Because I believe, and there's so much research to support this generation of students, this generation of young people care deeply about substantive social issues, justice, the environment, economic inequality. So they want an institution with a heart. And so those are ways we have to think about leveraging who we are and our strengths and articulating that value proposition to traditional aged undergraduate students. The other parts of the enrollment puzzle, we spend less time talking about, but that's where I spend most of my time thinking. It's who are students of the future? If not traditional undergraduate students, they're graduate students, they're adult students, they're professional students, and how do we equally communicate to them why Canisius is distinct and what they will get here that they will not get anywhere else. What those groups want are a little different. They want flexibility. When you're an adult, when you're a professional, you're not willing anymore to bend your life around the academic calendar of the institution. We as an institution have to flex to meet you and your life and your schedule, your work, your family. We have to think about being more flexible and adaptive to what those students tell us that they want out of their education. And we're working on that, and that's exciting because meeting students where they are is the only way we will be able to sustain over time.
Truly. So in terms of meeting students or prospective students where they are, you made a pretty exciting announcement earlier this week. Decision was made around test-free admissions requirements. And so we're calling it the test-free policy decision. And I was hoping you would talk a little bit more around the context of that. I got questions from family and friends around what does this mean? As I quickly responded, it's a very positive step, for the institution, but it would be great to hear you put some context around that.
Absolutely. And thank you for the question. It is for us, we are the first institution in Western New York to make this decision to no longer consider the SAT or the ACT in our admissions process. So the data available nationally tells us that standardized tests are not an accurate predictor of a student's ability to be successful in college. There are better indicators of how prepared a student is to be successful. So that's nationally, we know and understand that. The onset of the pandemic forced Canisius and so many other institutions to find different ways to evaluate students because you couldn't take these standardized tests. And so for 2 years, we were test optional. And what we learned from those 2 years is the students who came to us without submitting an SAT or ACT test score, they performed just as well as their peers. And so that in and of itself would have been enough for me. But we also saw a double digit, so I think 18% increase in applications, 13 or 14% increase in admits, and the diversity of our applicant pool went up almost around 40%. So those things internally also supported us rethinking how we admit students to Canisius. And that in tandem with historically, the standardized tests have been just one component of a holistic admissions process. True to our Jesuit core and values, cura personalis, care for the whole person. How do we understand that whole person? And a standardized test doesn't tell you that much about a person. What we know works is your GPA in high school. How have you sustained academic excellence over 4 years? Your leadership engagement, your service in your community, whatever that looks like, your church group, nonprofit, it doesn't matter. And how do you communicate? In writing, an essay, a personal statement, recommendation letters, interview with a faculty member and alumni. So again, more to come on that for this group, but how can we engage our alumni in interviewing prospective students? And the admissions team will obviously continue to be involved in interviews, and some creative element, a creative portfolio, right? So how our students do so many things that would add value and help us understand them in the context of how they fit as a member of a class of students at Canisius College. Do you have a design portfolio? Do you have a YouTube channel? Are you a social media influencer? Those things say so much about a student and how you fit as part of a community that we are trying to build and grow. So those are the things we'll rely on far more as we go forward without considering standardized tests. And it's exciting. And my sincere hope is that other institutions will see that there's a need to change our system. I talked about the status quo earlier. The SAT and ACT tests, standardized tests in general, disadvantaged, underrepresented, and underfunded communities, students who have cognitive disabilities or where there are language barriers. And so these tests keep far too many students and families out of the higher education system, the system that I believe in because of its transformative power. And it's my story. And we should be proud to include more people in that system, because when we do that and do it equitably and effectively, that's when we as a society will all rise.
So I love the early win on favorable outcomes in terms of diversity of prospective students. And so clearly, that's a leading decision. I also love that we're first in terms of an institution to make an important policy decision like that and publicize it. So thank you. Let's talk about another rumored but pending decision about the way we present our institution to our external stakeholders. And that is the name change, the difference in brand. And we have seen a number of local institutions already implement a branding change. The Canisius University of the Future has a lot of considerations around that. But if you could talk a little bit about the thought process and any specific timeline around that, pros and cons.
No, absolutely. And I think about it in a different context, right? Because I think there are institutions who've made this decision and done the change recently, and they've missed the opportunity because it is more than simply changing our name. It is an opportunity to restate our value proposition. It's an opportunity to talk in a different, new, aspirational way about what it means to be Canisius. So if we are going to do this and we continue to have conversations with our trustees about the importance of considering this type of change for the institution, if we're going to do it, we have to execute it really well, so that our communities, both here locally and outside of our primary market, so across the country, internationally, understand what this means from an academic perspective, what this means from a perspective of our commitment to our values, broadly speaking. And so it's the impetus is there to do it. The desire is there to do it. In a hyper competitive market, it is important that our prospective students and families understand that the value of a Canisius College education is one that endures over generations. How we position that in thinking about Canisius University is critically important. And so that, I think much of that has been the cause for us to be deliberate. That's the word I would use, to be deliberate in planning for and considering how to effectively do this, because it's not as simple as, change the signs. We could do that, but we would miss an opportunity to tell our story in a new and compelling way.
I was so gratified to learn early on in the discussion that Canisius actually functionally on paper and from a qualification perspective, we are in fact a university and function like a university today. And that, I think, made the case even more compelling to consider what that looks like down the road. But just touch on, and again, this pivots off a great live question that we got in terms of recruiting and what university means outside of Western New York and what type of an advantage that may give us as a university externally for prospective students.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it, particularly when we think about our tertiary market, which really means internationally, right? And I've said this in response to the question, I believe, from a faculty member at the State of the College early in October. Having grown up in Trinidad and Tobago, a former British colony, I went to two high schools. I went to high school and I went to prep school. And I went to St. Mary's College and Our Lady of Fatima College. And that's where I spent my educational years from the age of 11 to 18. And so around the world, particularly in former British colonies, college means something very different than what Canisius is. We think about university as where you go for your tertiary education after you're done with high school. And so simply with respect to our name, the challenges in penetrating international markets are that much greater for us as an institution, even though, to your point, Mariah, from an academic perspective, the programs we have are everything those markets and those students and those families want access to. But they don't give us a chance because the sophistication and understanding who we are isn't there. And so the name change will resonate significantly more in international markets than anywhere else. And that, because of the demographics and the changing demographics here in the US, it's critically important for us to consider because we need to think about other untapped markets for students and international, because this is my story. American higher education is still very sought after around the world. And we can capitalize on that because we have something that those students and those families can benefit from. Excellent.
Understood. So I want to pivot a little bit here in terms of topic, and I want to dig in a bit now on values. So we've already talked a bit about Jesuit values, Cura Personalis, but talk specifically about how you intend to not only uphold but amplify Jesuit values in the context of Canisius College or University, please.
Absolutely. And for me, that's probably one of the most critical things for me as president of the institution, but for the entire leadership team. It is for us to leverage our Jesuit identity, because what people associate with Jesuit is one, academic excellence. When we think about the Jesuit network and the institutions that we are affiliated with, that's what that means. So it's a sign of quality. And two, and this goes to something I said earlier, I really firmly believe that it's about being persons for and with others, right? How do we think about that in the context of where our society is today, and what we so desperately need to solve some of those pressing challenges. And our almost 500-year tradition of Ignatian spirituality of allows us to view that through the lens of, as a Jesuit institution, this is our commitment. And if we believe it, if we live it, then that is what I call authenticity. And there are very few things that are more important than being authentic. So it is not just about saying that we're Jesuit.
Mhm.
It's about living that we're Jesuit. And it starts with me, but that has to be very clear throughout the leadership of the institution, what it means to be Jesuit in the context of this present moment. And so it is not lost on me that as the leader of a Jesuit institution, we have to think about, and talk about, and work around being persons for and with others. And that's a unique calling, and one that I think, again, it's significantly appealing to this generation of young people when they're trying to find their purpose, find their calling. What it means for us is significant opportunity. And my dad always said, when you know your values, when you know and understand deeply what your values are, making decisions is easy, because you make decisions that are aligned with those values. And so that goes back to the test-free admissions policy decision. That's an easy one to make because we are committed to justice. Jesuit means justice.
Yes.
I needed the data to support it, but still easy.
So, our Jesuit history now becomes an opportunity to infuse, amplify what being Jesuit means to help us elevate and rise. I understand. Very, very well put. Thank you. You reference frequently Canisius being an urban school, and I love that. Again, being so proud of the city of Buffalo. But I've always felt Canisius was an urban school. As someone that grew up in the suburbs, and I was a transfer student and a commuter student in my junior and senior year, it felt like a big deal for me to commute into the city to go to school and go to my classes. But we do believe that being an urban institution is an important part of our identity. So talk a little bit about that side of it, and as well, what does Canisius mean to the Buffalo community, to the Western New York community? We are a leading institution, not just higher education institution, but what does that part of our identity mean in this community?
No, I think that's one of the first things that really dawned on me when I took the job and was actually here in Buffalo, meeting people in the community, is this very clear understanding that unlike most other places, Canisius is core to this community and this city and this region, because our graduates are everywhere. I usually say everyone has a Canisius connection. No matter where you go in this region, everyone has a Canisius connection. And that resonates. That is very clear, because I talk to people who aren't Canisius alums, but they hire Canisius alums and they work with Canisius alums. And our business community, our civic community, our political leaders, what you get when you encounter a Canisius graduate. And I think that is something that we must continue to maintain. For me, in thinking about that question, I often refer to the seal of the college, which I wear every day. It says the Canisius College of Buffalo, right? So we're not in Buffalo. We are part of the fabric of this community. That means deep, meaningful relationships throughout the community. That means when our community succeeds, we as an institution succeed because we are part of that whole. That means what an obligation and an opportunity to better support the renaissance and the resurgence here in Buffalo. So that's what it means to be an urban institution. And for our students, it means a connection to a vibrant, incredible city. Now, again, in thinking about, why Buffalo for me, great food, culture, history, sports. What more could you ask for in a place to live, learn, grow, thrive? So us being an urban institution with deep, meaningful connections to this community and this city, it's historically important, but it is a tremendous part of our future. And doing that at an even deeper and more meaningful level is what I foresee for Canisius 2035.
Yeah, I see it as beyond relationship to our community. We're such a critical part of the community. It's a little bit of a different way to term it, but it's so true. Talk about relationship to the world and addressing climate change and climate crisis, and what role can Canisius play in that, and what's our commitment to that very critical priority?
Now, I think there's a significant opportunity for us there. And obviously we have signed up to work toward becoming a Laudato Si university. And this is the call from Pope Francis, the Holy Father, for institutions of higher education to commit to very specific things as it relates to shepherding and stewarding our common home, our only home. And so our institutional commitment is there. In addition, we are one of only 2 Jesuit institutions on an international border. We are on the doorsteps of one of the wonders of the world. And so how do we think about leveraging our community, our faculty, our staff, our students, our connections in the community to lead the effort to better care for and steward our common home and our resources. And the way I think about it is we must leave a planet for our children and their children. And it starts with, as an academic institution, it starts in the classroom with our research. How do we encourage and support our faculty who are doing critically important research that extends to climate change and addressing climate change? How do we support students who, from a service perspective, care deeply about our environment and encourage them to do that work in the classroom, but also in a co-curricular and extracurricular sense, providing opportunities for our staff to engage with nonprofits and government and community organizations who are pursuing a climate agenda. So those are all things that would be part of our future, because it's critically important for us as an institution to be at the table and to be a leader when we talk about a sustainable future.
So Mother Earth thanks you for that, as well as, so many of our students and our alumni, that climate change and our commitment to climate integrity is so important. So thank you for that. So I'm going to shift gears one last time a little bit. We have 6 minutes left. So I want to continue to encourage any live questions from our audience today. We have a few here that have come in that we've already touched on a bit. So I'm going to move into the session that I'm going to call individual. And here's where we're going to dig a little bit further into the heart and the mind of President Stoute. Tell us, really, what have you enjoyed most about your transition to Canisius, and what you liked the most, big or small, and then what has surprised you the most, either about the institution or Buffalo or just your new life chapter?
I'll start with what has surprised me the most: the food. We have had incredible meals here in Buffalo, and so obviously, coming from outside the city, outside the region, everybody talks about buffalo wings but we have had just amazing food. And so that's one of the things I talk about all the time now when I talk to prospective students and parents. Like, the food, don't underappreciated the food scene here in Buffalo. The thing that I've enjoyed the most, people have been so welcoming and generous to me and my family, and that has meant the world to us. My wife and kids are settled and doing well, and so that's been the most heartwarming thing. It's just how we've been embraced as new members of this community.
Great. In terms of where we are located and the physicality of the campus and the city of Buffalo, two questions here. One, when we look around the campus, physical improvement projects, and look, I'm proud when I walk around the campus too. And, for alumni that have not been on campus recently, I please encourage you to do so. It's the best and easiest way for you to immediately feel a connection right back to our alma mater, walking around the campus, and you'd see what I see. We have a beautiful campus, but we obviously have some opportunities with our physical assets to make some changes. So maybe talk a little bit about your priorities in terms of physical improvement projects and what that looks like. And then, the city of Buffalo, Hamlin Park, how are we also partnering, not just in a community sense, but again, the physical assets, the boundaries that we share? Where are there opportunities there as well?
Absolutely. That's a great question. And it goes back to what I was saying earlier about creating the structures and spaces that allow for the type of engagement experience we want for our faculty, our staff, our students, our community. And so when I think about our capital planning and our physical plant, it is creating, building, transforming the spaces that allow us to convene, right? Canisius should be a convener. So when we think about what it means to lead in this community, we should be the place people come to convene and talk about and work through and think through the most complicated and pressing tasks and challenges and issues. And that's exciting. And I talk about swinging the proverbial gates of the institution wide open, such that there's a free and flow of information and of people. Because again, that goes to our commitment to being part of the fabric of this community. We can't exist in isolation in this community. We must be part of it. We must welcome our neighbors onto our campus. We must send our students and our faculty into our communities and in our neighborhoods, not from a place of deficit. So one of the theories I learned along in my career, it's called asset-based community development. So our engagement with the community is not from a place of, you are at a deficit, I am at a different place, let me help you. It's from a place of, you as a community, in spite of whatever the challenges are, circumstances are, you have significant assets. How can we as an institution support you in leveraging those assets to achieve better outcomes? And so that's how I think about our commitment to community from a physical standpoint. We have so many physical resources. How do we use those to better support a community that is on the rise. And that's an exciting opportunity for us. But we also have to think about our space and utilizing our space in a way that creates opportunity and moments for innovation, for that spark that will lead to real change. But all fun. It's all fun.
Great. So we just have 1 minute left. I think this is a great way for us to maybe wrap up our time together. And that's, please tell us, what can we do? Lots of different stakeholders, but what is it that we can do to best support you, President Stoute, in terms of your important charge forward?
The biggest thing I would say is continue to engage in the conversation about our future and what that looks like, and answer when called. I think that is the biggest thing. So I want this shaping of our vision and our strategy to be as inclusive as possible, to engage as many constituents as possible in that process. But then comes the work of implementing the plan. And for us to do that, it is shared leadership. And so I will, and the team we will seek you out as we think about creative ways to move Canisius forward. And I hope that you will raise your hand, you will answer the call, so that together we will rise. Thank you.
Thank you. Proud to have answered the call and be able to spend this time with you today, President Stoute. And a thank you to everybody for joining us today. We will post the recorded version of this webinar for your viewing pleasure. If you have any questions that come up, please feel free to reach out to any member of our institutional advancement team to make sure that all of your questions, ideas, thoughts, and support are heard. So thank you so much, everyone. Enjoy your day.
Thank you.